In previous videos, we've discussed how activity-based costing leads to more accurate product costs, and we can also use activity-based costing to figure out the profitability of different types of customers that the company has and see that maybe there's one customer type that is unprofitable and the company should drop that customer type and so forth. So activity-based costing is the best costing system that we know of in terms of helping make better decisions. And yet, we also know that there are many companies that have not implemented activity-based costing. So this leaves us with a bit of a paradox, and the question is why? Why is it the case, if we know that this is the best costing system, that not all companies, why isn't it that 100% of companies are using activity-based costing? And the reason is that there's a number of disadvantages of activity-based costing. And if you're a manufacturer, probably the biggest disadvantage is that it would force you to have two separate cost systems if you were to implement ABC. And here's why. ABC is not GAAP. Okay, you can't use it when we're putting together the financial statements, the income statement, the balance sheet. You can't use activity-based costing to calculate cost of goods sold or ending inventory. Okay, for the financial statements, you have to use a traditional costing system such as job order costing, process costing, some hybrid approach. You cannot use activity-based costing to calculate cost of goods sold or ending inventory. So if you are a manufacturer, this is an issue, because if you were to adopt ABC, then you'd be doing basically job order costing or process costing for your financial statements. You'd have that cost system for that. And then you'd have activity-based costing for your internal decision making. So then you'd be having two different cost systems being maintained at the same time, which obviously would be very costly and time consuming. And it's also very time consuming to have to interview all the employees. And this pertains not just to manufacturers, but any type of company that wants to implement ABC. Think about this. The whole idea behind activity-based costing is that we're getting better information, we're getting better data about cause and effect relationships between different cost drivers and how they lead to costs and stuff. So we have to go and interview people and ask them, okay, how much of your time do you spend doing certain activities and so forth? And so that's going to take a lot of time. If you only have 10 employees, maybe it's not a big deal. But what about a company that has 20,000 employees? And then another issue that pertaining to interviewing these people is when you interview people, let's say there are 3 different activities, X, Y, and Z, that the employee is going to do. And you ask them, how much of your time do you spend on each of these activities? And they say 20% of their time on X, 30% on Y, and 50% on Z. So you see the problem with this? It adds up to 100%. It adds up to 100%. And you say, what's the issue with that? Well, do people really spend 100% of their time working? They have to go to the bathroom, or they take a break or something like that. There's idle time. There's idle time when people aren't doing anything. But people aren't going to report that when you interview them, because who's going to say, yeah, I spent 15% of my time idle, not doing any work, right? People are going to give you, when you interview them, they're going to give you stuff that adds up to 100%. So they're basically going to be overstating the amount of time that they spend on activities, so you're not getting the best data when you collect it from the employees, right? So, and now, having done all that, let's say you interview the employees, you get the data, you're going to have, particularly if you have a large company, you're going to have a massive amount of data. And I don't know if you've ever done any statistical analysis, but if you have, you know that when you have a very, very large amount of data, it could take days just to process all the data, right? So when you're trying to analyze it and figure out these cause and effect relationships, it's going to take you days just to process the data. And then you might even have to pay a company to store all the data and so forth. So if you think about a large company that has hundreds of millions of transactions and how much data they have to be able to process it and store it, it's very costly and time consuming. And now when we think about the payoff, this shouldn't be as big of a deal in theory, because you would think that the goal of the CEO is to maximize the long-term value of the firm, but that's not always the case. People tend to think about the short term, this quarter, this year. And when you implement an activity-based costing system, it's not going to have a payoff this quarter. It's going to cost you money to implement it this quarter, but the payoff might not come for years into the future. And so people don't want to wait for this long-term payoff. And so they tend to think about the short term, and they say, okay, well, we don't want to invest in something that's going to take years before it would pay off. And then another thing to think about is, and this is not just a drawback to activity-based costing, this is really a drawback to implementing any type of new system, is that employees, some of them, will resist the new system. For example, if you think about customer profitability analysis, and you think about it, and you say, okay, let's say that the company serves 3 different types of customers, okay, customer M, N, and O, and we look at this and we go and do A, B, C, and we see that, okay, customer M is actually unprofitable. So this customer is not profitable, and these 2 customers are profitable. Now, whoever's in charge of the relationship with customer M, are they going to say, oh yeah, we should just drop customer M and I should no longer have a job, right? So people will sometimes resist and say, hey, this is making my product that I really am in charge of look less profitable, so it's going to lead to issues. And then there's just a general thing of people don't want to get used to a new system. They're used to the old way of doing things. And so these are just to give you an idea of some of the reasons that activity-based costing has implemented in all firms.